Hey, welcome to another video. Toole Automotive has sent me some stainless steel brake lines for my Maserati here. So in this video, I'm going to fit them. So I'd just like to say at this point, a big thanks to Toole Automotive for sending me out this stainless steel brake line kit. And full disclosure, they have given it to me for free to do this review on. But you might be wondering why I'm changing the brake lines. After all, she's just actually passed the MOT, which is cool, and there was no issue with the brake lines. Well, the answer to that is the standard flexible hoses fitted to most new cars, including exotics like this, are made from flexible rubber. And they go from the hard brake line down to the caliper and just allow suspension movement, the steering and all that sort of stuff. And they work very well. But the flexible rubber flexes not just in this way, but also in the diameter. So when you apply that brake pedal, some of the effort from applying that brake pedal goes into slightly expanding that brake line. You're essentially putting a little bit of effort into blowing up or increasing the diameter of that brake line before the fluid gets down to the caliper and can actually apply the brakes. And this can feel not like a spongy puddle, but it means you've got a little bit less bite on your brakes because there's this slight disconnect, this slight reservoir, if you like, of excess effort. So what most people do in time, and when their brake lines perish, which I'm surprised hasn't happened to these because these are in remarkable good condition, despite being from 2008. I can see the date stamps here. What most people do is change them for stainless steel braided brake lines. And what these do is the stainless steel braid helps keep that diameter in check. So when you apply the brake pedal, it doesn't expand quite as much. It still expands slightly because that's physics, but it will expand less, giving you a much better feel to the brake pedal. So in some applications, like on my bike, where you've got really quite a long line from the clutch down to the engine, putting a stainless steel line on there can really sort of transform the feel of the clutch and give you a much crisper sort of biting point on there. And it has made a big difference on the bike. As for this application, what you need to remember with the 4.2 Granturismos is that they were provided with 330mm front brake discs. And these are perfectly adequate for general use. But it's notable that on the 4.7, they went up to 360mm discs. And the thing is these cars all weigh the same. So the 4.2 and the 4.7 have around about the same curb weight. So you're still having to stop the same amount of weight, the same amount of kinetic energy when you apply that brake pedal. But the 4.7s with their bigger discs will stop quicker. And that can make a big difference if you're driving down the motorway and someone slams their brakes on in front of you. Another couple of meters might mean the difference between, swearing a little bit and getting a bit annoyed, or, taking out the front of your beautiful bumper here and grille. So on the 4.2, it's adequate, but it could do that little bit more feel, that little bit more power. And this is a cheap way to start improving the brakes. As I say, they're adequate, but no one ever complains about having a little bit better brakes, do they, really? I mean, it's not one of those things you go, I wished I had worse brakes. So anything I can get is an advantage. And also, of course, by changing these, I'm removing a potential MOT failure point in the future, which will be most welcome. Now, one of the things I'm sort of thinking about in the background while we're on the subject is that it happens to be that 4.7 calipers will actually fit the 4.2 without any modification. You need the calipers and you need the actual discs. And then I would have 360mm discs on the front, and that will be a little bit better. Toole Automotive actually do a big brake kit as well, which comes with 380mm discs and the calipers and 2 stainless steel brake lines. It's 1,700 quid delivered, including VAT, so it's beyond my means realistically. But it's a good point to note that if you needed new discs anyway and your pads were worn, then pads and discs for a Granturismo are 500-600 quid depending on where you go. It can be a lot more than that, but that's the sort of price for the 4.2s. So if you were to buy a 1,700 quid kit, but you needed 600-700 quid's worth of discs and pads anyway, and you sold your old calipers on eBay for 2, 3, 400 quid, you can actually get the price of that big brake kit down to your pocket to around about sort of that 800 quid mark, which would be, much more tolerable. Unfortunately, it's still above my means. So I am looking out anyhow for some calipers and things off of 4.7. And there's two good reasons why it would be really nice to have better brakes on this car. As I said before, you've got the stopping distances, which obviously is always going to be a bonus. But the other thing is, and this might sound incredibly vain, but the brakes on this, they don't really fill out the wheel space very much. They look they're a bit smaller. She's got 20-inch wheels and the brakes look a little bit small on the front. If you've got some big matey discs on the front, it just looks so much better, doesn't it? That might be a silly reason, but hey. But for my head, it's the stopping distances. For my heart, it will be the look of big brakes on the front. Anyway, I'd better get on with fitting these things. Although, as you can tell, I've already fitted one of them. So as you can see, the wood underneath the wheels, it just raises her up enough that I can get my jack slid underneath and jack her up. So I guess it's time to get a wheel off. I don't really like doing brakes. It's just always that sort of faff around. We're trying to get the air out afterwards. Should be fairly straightforward on this job though. So to get her through the last MOT, I had to get new rear tyres. And unfortunately, I couldn't do my plan of finding a cheaper method. So I ended up buying two brand new tyres, Bridgestone Potenza Sports, like they fit on the MC20. And they were £494. The pain of having to fork out such a large amount of money was quickly obscured by the fact that the idiots went and blimmin' scratched my alloy wheels like I'm showing you here. One thing to note while I'm here is, other than noticing that they had scratched my alloy wheel, and they've paid me for that, I took the wheel off and they have used a wire brush on my nice aluminium spacer here. So this was nicely anodized, and you can see that they've basically scuffed it up to make sure there's no dirt on it. But since it was a brand new spacer and there was no dirt on it and it's anodized, you really don't want someone scuffing up the anodizing. So if you've fitted wheel spacers and you care about your car, watch the tyre fitters with extreme caution, because they don't seem to be able to do the sort of standard sort of thinking process that you would expect someone who works on cars can do. I tend to get nervous starting a job like this. So the first thing I've done is I've gone around making sure I can undo the bleed nipples. I've managed to crack that slightly and get that ready. And I'm going to do the other end of the hose and just make sure everything's going to come undone before I actually do too much and take the car off the road until it's fixed, if you know what I mean. I know that sounds a bit paranoid, but I seem to have so many things breaking on me at times that I just take it step by step and ease myself into the pain. Difficulty for me on a job like this as well is, normally I do a job like this to get it through MOT. So I got the attitude of, I have to do it. But this is an upgrade job. She's got through the MOT, she's passed her MOT, she's good for another year, and I just have to do this though, because I want to get it done. Right, it's getting dark now, and I've been through a bit of a nightmare procedure undoing all of this. I had to unwind the caliper off the end of this pipe because the little fitting there was seized into this one here. On the original pipes, this is a solid fitting all the way through, so that little nut was seized onto the pipe, and therefore if I carried on turning it, I would have ended up damaging this pipe. So what I did is I undid the caliper and then just wound this pipe out of there to free it off. That's now unseized itself, but the good news is the new Maserati pipes from Toole Automotive, that nut there, that stainless steel nut, actually spins on top of the pipe. So even if this is seized in the future, you could still undo that nut without having to undo calipers and everything. Anyhow, that's in place. I just want to get it all in place tonight and back together again, simply because I don't want, for one thing, all the fluid draining out and then I have to do a hideous bleed job tomorrow, or I don't want any dirt getting in overnight. So my new pipe is in here. and it's coming down here. I've tightened it up. I can stick it in its little socket there with that little rubber grommet, and then I can wind the caliper back on, tighten it up on this end, and then that's me done for the night, and then I'll do the bleeding tomorrow. Right, so I'm testing the theory of self-bleeding brakes. So one of the mechanics on the forum said, if you make sure the reservoir is topped up and you crack the nipples on the calipers, they will actually bleed through by gravity. And certainly I seem to be getting the fluid in the air coming out quite happily there. So I'm just monitoring it, and then at the end I'll try the standard original method. They said if you actually popped a 3-pint pot on the brake reservoir and make sure it's topped up, you can literally just crack all the nipples, walk away from the car, come back when it's, you know, not run out obviously, but when the 3 pints are gone in and you still got a bit left in the reservoir, shut all the valves and you've changed the fluid. So anyhow, I'm just doing this one at the moment and see how it goes. I'm on the second side now, rear side, and I just sort of capture a couple of things I might not have done before. So there's the little black bush that's got to go in there. As said, these are harder plastic, so they don't slide in quite so easy. So you can bend the metal out a little bit, which I've done. I've just used a ring spanner to just sort of eke it out a little bit. I'll show that with a cut-in clip, cutaway. But yeah, so I've just got a bit of wood hammer on this end. Oh, you can't quite see, but yeah, there it goes. So this is the manky old clip that then goes in here, and then I'm dropping it. Right, so this little thing just slides into the groove that's there. You lift that pipe up like that and then slide this clamp in there like that, so it goes into the groove that's in the stainless steel new line. And then it's almost there. I'll just get a block of wood and my hammer. Okay, so that's it all in place. So as I say, I've put a piece of wood on the rears. I've put a piece of wood just like this, just behind here, just to eke that round a little bit. I'm going to spray all this with spray grease when I'm done. It's kind of like underbody seal in a way. Down here, this bracket, I've bent it forward a little bit, and you must make sure you get that hammered all the way in. It is quite a tight kink. I mean, that's a Maserati thing. I'm half tempted to cut this off and move this bracket over so that you haven't got this. It's not that much of a tight kink, and obviously it's a stainless steel line and it is standard. You know, this is just how the Maserati was. There's enough flex in the pipe, so I'm relatively happy, but I don't really understand why Maserati put the bracket here. I think it should have been over slightly. I've managed to get it a little bit nicer in line, but only just. Of course, the thing you got to remember is once she's off the jacks, the pipe will be up here somewhere, so it will have a nice curve. Just perhaps looks a little bit bizarre at the moment because she's on the jack, but that is how it fits. It's horrible manky weather at the moment, all windy and dank and miserable. Looking forward to finishing this job, I really am. Right, so this brake line went a little bit easier. So you've got the union down there. Don't forget the 2 copper washers. Here, I used some pliers to force them in. I got a ring spanner on the hook bits and just bent them up slightly, just ever so slightly, to give it a slightly wider diameter because I think it's just very tight. Again, this one, the nut was seized onto the pipe, and as I was turning the nut, the pipe was twisting. So yeah, just go careful with that. And of course, afterwards, put some nice grease around all of this area, because the front subframe is a pain. But if it's greased up all the time and looked after, then it's okay. But they rust on that little section down there, so I welded this plate in, which was enormous fun. I put a little bit of stainless steel back in, and I left 2 cutouts in the bottom, because what can happen is the water runs down the back there. They've only welded it there and there, so there's a slight gap, I say slight gap, I mean a millimetre, but by capillary action over years, the water gets into this box here and can't get out again. So there's kind of a gap down the bottom, but capillary action tends to let things in. It doesn't tend to let them out, or rather it keeps them in there. I'm down to the last corner now. I've done all the suspension. The suspension probably was about half a day of job. But the actual changing the pipes, I mean, you're only talking an hour per corner, plus a bit more for bleeding the brakes. So it shouldn't take very long to do realistically. Anyway, I better get on with this. I don't want air getting stuck in that corner there. So if I've put my new hose on when it's still dripping, and then feed it round here, let the fluid come out the end, screw it on there, uncrack that. Basically, there's no chance for an air bubble to come back up here and get stuck in that loop there. All right, so this one up top, what is it? 15mm, I think, spanner, and the little bolt there that keeps on seizing up is 11. This LED is making my camera go funny, isn't it? But it's getting dark, so I'm just making sure that will undo. I have already checked it a bit. And I've just remembered what happens with this one. It's got a thing that stops the hose from turning up here. So I need to get this little clamp off here. I'm just going to do what I did on the other side, which is I'm just going to bend it out because, as I say, that nut's seized in there. So I really don't want to seized onto the brake line. I really don't want to risk it. So you just sort of pull it down like that now. And now I should be able to undo it relatively easily.
Again, the new pipe, the end fitting there turns freely, so you don't need to worry about the fact that the nut's seized on the old pipe.
Maybe less. Yeah, you see that's nice and loose now. Right, the thing I've always found with gloves is that because the gloves make your hands sweat, even if they've got holes in them, they seem to be better for you. That's dripping away nicely. That's about how much it drips down there with the brake fluid, the line open, and the reservoir without the cap. So now I'm going to quickly unscrew this, but hopefully with the brake fluid dropping, air is not going to go up into that top thing. There we go. That's that one out. Over there on a thing. I've got my nice new brake line here. It's dripping away well and happy. Like so. That is now screwed finger tight. Try not to get any dirt in anything. Don't forget the little copper washers here. The copper washer, one on the outside, one on the inside, like that. One there, one there. And then this just goes down here. So I'm going to let the brake fluid come down this pipe before I stick it in the caliper. Ah, great, I've got fluid coming out the end now. So I'm fairly happy now to go and shove it in the back of the caliper here. Almost immediately, I'm going to open my blood screw. And then this on here. And then I'm going to run this down, and I've got a clamp to clamp it to my dirty brake fluid mank tray. You see, bubbles are coming up quite nicely on this one.
So with bleeding the brakes, I came to the conclusion that the method of opening the bleed screws and just letting gravity feed the fluid through does actually work. However, I think it only really works properly if you've got no air in the system already. So therefore, if you've got a bit of air, it just basically doesn't create enough pressure to move those air bubbles down the tube to the caliper where they can then exit the system. So if you've changed the pipes, you can get the initial burst of air out, but you need to do the sort of old-fashioned method of forcing that fluid through at speed to dislodge those bubbles. So I got the boy to help me here. to push down on the pedal. I also then later on bought one of the little brake bleed kits that you attach to the master cylinder and sort of use compressed air from a tyre like this to pressurize the reservoir and help push the fluid through. It didn't seem to increase the speed of the fluid very much. So then I came up with a hybrid method where I actually got the boy back again and I put pressure on the master reservoir and then had him push down on the pedal when I opened the screw, and then when it got to the bottom I'd shut the screw, the bleed screw again, and it'd lift the pedal and suck new fluid under pressure into the system, and that did seem to dislodge all those bubbles. I had no issues or problems with the ABS pump because obviously I hadn't drained the fluid out of the system sufficiently to get any air into the ABS pump. If you get air into the ABS pump, that's when you have to start messing around with an OBD2 scanner, cycling the pump and that lot to try and dislodge that air.
Right, she's all back together again. So I've bled the brakes. She's had a complete brake fluid flush and change there. I've got 4 brand new stainless steel braided brake lines on there, and the braking system's in the best possible condition it can be now. On the road, there's not a massive amount of difference that you can feel, but there's no doubt that the pedal is just that bit more crisper, just that bit more responsive, and that's a very good thing. So I'm very happy with the end result. Now, if this video has been useful to you and interesting, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks very much.
Good job it's got an emergency cutout.